Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news. The Bloomberg Businessweek podcast with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec from Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bloomberg Businessweek Weekend podcast. The countdown to Election Day, it is on. And as we approach the final home stretch to November 5th, we'll hear why one outspoken billionaire Trump supporter is now the Democrats' new supervillain. We're talking, of course, about Elon.
And speaking of Elon Musk, big tech earnings season, it is here. Tesla reported a solid quarter. Maybe that's an understatement. More on the company's results just a little later on.
Bit of a surprise, safe to say. Okay, from Tesla to its Chinese competitor that Elon Musk once mocked, we talk next hour on BYD's rise from battery maker to auto colossus.
Plus, she's responsible for banking supervision, consumer protection, and fintech in Italy. The deputy governor of the Bank of Italy stops by.
All of that to come. We begin with U.S. politics. We are a little over a week away from the U.S. presidential election between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. As the nominees enter the final stretch, both are deploying novel tactics, from podcast cameos to star-studded concerts, as both try to scrounge up undecided voters and basically win this election.
Another tactic? Writing a giant $1 million check to persuade voters to turn out. That's what Elon Musk has been doing, and it's raised the question from some federal officials as to whether or not it's actually legal. The latest federal filings show that Musk has poured at least $75 million into his America PAC, making him one of the top donors overall this cycle.
And that has caught the ire of Democratic voters, who now view him as a political supervillain. So writes Bloomberg Businessweek national correspondent Josh Green.
Josh is also the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Devil's Bargain, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency. And more recently, the Rebels, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the rise of the New Left.
In terms of politics, he's become so fiercely identified with MAGA and with Donald Trump. The Democrats and liberal groups have stood up and taken notice, and he's such a polarizing figure and so emblematic, I think, of the kind of rich, dark money billionaires that liberals like to demonize in their political ads, that Elon has been popping up in more and more ads across the country, whether it's from Kamala Harris's campaign or congressional candidates or unions or liberal super PACs. More and more of them are featuring Elon in their political ads. A lot of them are even featuring the same footage of him in a tuxedo. So as I write in the piece, he's kind of eclipsed the Koch brothers as the leading villain among Democratic ad makers, and it's clear that it's resonating with liberal voters.
Without giving the full piece away, because of course we want everyone to go read Bloomberg Businessweek, what are some of those tactics that the Democratic Party is using when they are painting Elon Musk as the super villain here? What are they really touching on?
Well, there are two themes that Democratic ad makers really key in on, and Elon happens to encompass both of them. The first is Democrats obviously for decades have been going after what they would call, greedy corporate billionaires. Elon Musk is the world's richest man, certainly fits that billing. The other thing that I think has become more popular among liberal ad makers in the time of Trump is raising fears of kind of right-wing media manipulation. And of course, Musk, with his ownership of Twitter, also fills that bucket. So in a lot of ways, he's kind of emerged as this cycle's perfect Democratic villain. And the fact that he arouses such intense emotions in liberals, causing them either to click and give money or to volunteer for Democratic campaigns, I think just shows that he's really an important new player in politics this cycle in a way that most people, I don't think, would have anticipated even a year or two ago.
Yeah, I think that's certainly fair to say. Josh, you mentioned that it's resonating with Democratic donors, with the electorate. What do we know about polling and the way that Democrats versus Republicans feel about Elon Musk?
Well, perhaps not surprisingly, Elon Musk is very, very unpopular with Democrats and especially younger liberal Democrats. And we know this because the Bloomberg News Morning Consult swing state poll actually went last month and asked people about their favorable and unfavorable ratings on Elon Musk, the same way they would with a politician like Trump or Harris. And sure enough, Elon is becoming viewed in much the same way that a partisan politician would, where Republicans, their views of him have improved. A lot of them like what they hear from him, whereas Democrats, who were once very positive about Musk because of his association with Tesla and electric cars and environmentalism, now have turned on him very sharply, and he's deeply underwater. I think something to the extent of 17% are favorable and something like 79 or 80% unfavorable. So he's every bit as unpopular, or almost as unpopular with Democrats as is Donald Trump.
And what do we know so far about how effective it is for the Republican Party to be using Elon Musk in a positive light as opposed to the Democratic Party kind of using him in negative campaign advertisements?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, we do have some indications that Elon is effective. Donald Trump's campaign sends out literally daily emails offering to sell the Elon Musk dark MAGA hat, the black Make America Great hat that Musk wore at his rally with Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania a couple weeks ago. I get a barrage of emails from the Trump campaign touting his association with Elon, or Elon's offer to match funding. And so the Trump campaign seems to feel that he's a very effective fundraiser because they keep pumping out these emails. So, as one of my Democratic sources told me in the piece, Elon is basically a walking content factory. You can't look away from him. So I think the story here really is that whether you're a Republican campaign or a Democratic campaign, Elon Musk has become such a central figure that it's advantageous to put him in political ads, whether that's touting his association with Donald Trump or attacking his association with Donald Trump. It can raise money either way.
Josh, I think what's notable about this is, your story comes out on the same day that the New York Times writes about how somebody like Jamie Dimon over at JP Morgan is supporting Kamala Harris, but is reticent to come out and even say so for fear of alienating people who work for him, for fear of alienating customers and the like. Elon Musk doesn't show any of that fear. And he runs or is at the helm of several companies. And you don't often see people in positions in business take a stand such as Elon Musk is doing. And I wonder what your view is on that and what's unique about this case and unique about Elon Musk. The Koch brothers certainly had the money and they were donating the money, but they weren't out there jumping around on stage at rallies.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, the kind of old style Democratic villain were these reclusive fossil fuel billionaires like the Koch brothers who didn't want to be in the media, didn't want to be featured. And now we have this new style villain in Elon Musk, who seems as eager to be out there and in front of the cameras and being the center of attention as anybody. And that's made the Democrats' job really easy for them. As to why Musk has decided to identify himself so strongly with the MAGA movement and Donald Trump, I really can't say. I mean, I know anecdotally, and you can see it in the polling numbers that we have, that liberal Tesla owners are very upset about this. Democrats don't like him. Presumably, this is going to have some effect on the margins of his companies, but he has decided for whatever reason, maybe because he has so much money, maybe because he's such a true believer in Trump and what he stands for, that he doesn't care and he's going to go out and do this anyway. And I think that's one reason why Musk has unexpectedly emerged as one of the most fascinating figures on my beat of presidential politics. He's a new character, he's out there, and he's demanding that the spotlight be on him. And I think as a result, it is on him, and we're seeing all the different influences and effects that he can have on a presidential race.
And of course, one of those influences is the money involved. Tim had mentioned this,
yes,
but the latest federal filings show that Musk has poured at least $75 million into the PAC that supports Donald Trump. How does that stack up with other donors and then other campaigns that we know Musk has been involved in?
Well, it immediately makes him one of the single largest donors in American politics. It's remarkable. Before this cycle, he wasn't known as a major donor. And in fact, he was kind of reputed among people in D.C. in my world to be kind of a cheapskate who talked a lot but didn't write a lot of checks. Well, now he's decided that he wants to be one of the biggest donors in American politics. And I think you can see the effect that that's had. Just in the opening segment you guys showed of all the clips of Trump mentioning Elon Musk, he brings him up again and again in public and in private. And so if Trump is elected, I think that Musk stands to be a very important figure in the Trump administration, and that he'll essentially have bought himself a level of influence that most people, even very, very rich people, are reluctant to do, to try and come out publicly and declare their association, give this much money. Elon is really plowing new ground here, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of effect that has if Trump makes it back into the White House.
Yeah, I do wonder what he would want to see when it comes to his own influence or what he would want to do. Which brings me to my next question about unions, Josh, because they play a central role in your story. And Elon Musk has had a contentious relationship with unions, given that Tesla is not a union shop and other U.S. automakers are. Talk a little bit about that and what we've heard from unions when it comes to Elon Musk.
Yeah, well, I started noticing a few weeks ago, Elon kind of popping up in these political ads. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is not something we would have seen before this cycle. So I wound up doing a very deep dive looking at the Elon Musk political ads. And some of the earliest ones that ran were by unions. The Service Employees International Union was one of the first. They had run ads around Elon even before his MAGA and Trump associations, because he was sort of the personification of what they would consider the greedy corporate union busting boss. He was in a big fight with Swedish unions at a time. And I think that really kind of gained momentum. I found other ads from Teamsters against Trump and all sorts of local unions using Musk to kind of highlight this idea that greedy bosses are screwing union workers, and Elon Musk sort of stands for everything we're fighting against. I talked to one union president for the piece who says Musk is the personification of everything that our polling tells us middle-class, ordinary workers don't like. And so it's very easy for us to feature him in our political ads because he tells the story that we're trying to tell.
Hey, Josh, speaking of stories, you wrote the book on Steve Bannon, and we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you about Steve Bannon and his influence or lack thereof on the election this time around, given that he's been serving a 120-day sentence in federal prison. He's set to be released from that next week. What are your thoughts on how Steve Bannon's influence, who had such a big one in 2016, has loomed over this cycle?
It's a great question. I think if you look at how outrageous some of the Trump claims have been, some of the events, the kind of lack of inhibitions that we see in Trump's campaign vis-a-vis what we would see from an ordinary Republican candidate, I think a lot of that goes back to Bannon and the style of politics that he pioneered. From what I understand, he's getting released from prison in a week, so he will be here for the final week of the campaign. And who knows? Wouldn't surprise me at all to see him out at a Trump campaign rally on stage with Donald Trump, leading on the crown in the days before the election. But we'll have to wait and see.
We also just got news that Donald Trump is expected to record an interview with Joe Rogan at his studio in Austin, Texas. That's according to Politico. What do you make of that? I mean, how effective is going on a podcast as big as Joe Rogan's? And the Politico report also said that Kamala Harris is also in talks to go on that podcast as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's smart for both candidates from the standpoint that young men in particular tend to be low propensity but Trump-friendly voters. So Trump going on Joe Rogan makes a lot of sense to kind of reach these young men and try and motivate them to get up off the couch and show up at the polls on November 5th. For Harris, I think the story is very much the same, is that the reason she would go on that show would be to try and make a last bid to these young men not to go support Donald Trump, but maybe to find a reason to support her, or at the very least, not be so outraged and provoked by her that they decide to go vote for Donald Trump. I think for a lot of Harris people, they would be fine having Joe Rogan's listeners just stay at home. But basically, they want to fight Trump to a draw when it comes to winning the hearts and minds of young men. So it looks like now that Joe Rogan's podcast is kind of going to be the arena for that battle to be fought 10, 15 days before voters go to the polls.
Josh, last question. I'm not going to ask you to make a prediction here, but given your reporting and what you've heard from your visits around the country as you report out your stories, is the election indeed as close as the polls are telling us?
Yeah, I mean, I've been privy to a lot of private polling from Democrats, Democratic groups, and some Republicans over the last couple of weeks. And everyone that I've seen shows the race to be absolutely as close as the public polls that we're seeing. So my assumption is that those polls are largely accurate and that we may not know for a day or even several days who the winner of the election actually is.
All right, Josh Green. Hopefully we get him one more time before polls close 2 weeks from tonight. Josh, really appreciate you taking the time. Josh Green is Bloomberg Businessweek national correspondent. He's the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Devil's Bargain, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency. Also, The Rebels, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the Rise of the New Left.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
I do want to give some rough estimate, which is I think it's 20 to 30% vehicle growth next year. Notwithstanding negative external events.
That's Elon Musk from this week's Tesla earnings call as the company reported better than expected profits in the third quarter. Now, Tesla's shares surged the most in more than 3 years after the car maker reported surprisingly strong earnings and forecast as much as 30% growth in vehicle sales next year. Elon's saying that on the earnings call.
The third quarter results were boosted by the Cybertruck generating a profit for the first time, lower material costs, an expanding energy business, and sales of regulatory credits to automakers that need help complying with emissions limits. With more on Tesla's surprisingly strong earnings, we were joined by Bloomberg News Global Autos editor Craig Trudell.
Musk was in sort of rare form. I think, you often can sort of can count on him being quite positive. And, sometimes he gives people reasons to bid the stock up. Other times, he's less careful. I think he wasn't necessarily careful. He at one point said something about, I'm going to take a risk and offer, this upbeat outlook for next year. He also, sort of couched this. Later on, he talked about, his forecast for how many cyber cabs they'll make, a couple years out as just his best guesses. So that being said, there was a lot to like about this quarter in terms of, sort of the breadth of what went well. I think expectations were quite low in terms of what revenue and earnings were going to be. And they beat expectations on a lot of metrics, and it was kind of widespread. It wasn't just the car business. They're doing well on the energy side as well.
Well, that's what I wondered, Craig, is this a report where we were all managed so well going into it and had very low expectations? And so when Tesla comes in stronger than forecast and above those low expectations, we were all just like, whoa, really surprised? Or is this a report where Tesla, the business, is actually doing well?
I think it's a little bit of all the above. I mean, is it a 21% move up in the shares sort of report? I'm shocked by this, but what do I know? I'm just a journalist, so I think it is the case that the stock has gotten roughed up a little bit the last couple of weeks since the robo-taxi unveiling. I think there was really high expectations going into that because Musk, had sort of spent months hyping up, all the work that they've done on AI and years now on self-driving. And we don't actually have, necessarily clear indications that, some of the promises he's made or predictions that he's made are close. You don't have to look very far to see, people who use the product that the company calls full self-driving, acting up, not working so well. They recognized some revenue this past quarter from deferred revenue related to that business. And, one of the features that they rolled out, actually Smart Summon, which is an interesting acronym, we're seeing reports of people trying to summon their cars in parking lots and getting into scrapes. And so, there's still, a lot left to be said about, just how much longer this company, needs to work on this technology to get it to where it's safe.
Hey, Craig, there were a lot of questions ahead of the earnings call about whether or not analysts would ask any questions related to Elon Musk's political activities, the $75 million he's given to the America PAC in support of former President Donald Trump during this election cycle. What did we hear from Musk on the call about a potential second Trump administration? How did he weigh in on politics?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think, Tesla solicits investor questions, going into these calls, and there were a lot of questions submitted having to do with politics and investors wanting to, hear Musk address, his support for Trump and just how outspoken he's been. He didn't utter Trump's name once, which was a little surprising to me, but he did allude to this idea of, maybe if he were to be appointed the head of the government efficiency department that he and Trump talked about on X a while back, maybe he would work on national rules for getting robo-taxis on the road. So he sort of gave investors a little bit of a taste of how he would, potentially be able to tip the scales after becoming such a huge benefactor of Donald Trump.
Investors who wanted something today got better than expected profit and guidance for growth on deliveries. That was from Gene Munster over at Deepwater Asset Management. He said the long-term investors got the golden carrot. So is it the golden carrot on the delivery numbers? Is that what it is?
I think that was a big one. I mean, there's I think real legitimate concern as to whether or not the company will deliver more cars this year than it did last year. Through the first 3 quarters of the year, that deliveries are down, and they're going to need a real substantial jump in the fourth quarter to get to where they're positive. I think the company surprised people by saying they do expect some slight growth for this year, so they're really going to have to finish strong. And then 20 to 30%, I think that sounds great. I didn't necessarily get a strong sense of how exactly this company is going to pull that off because they have not specified what sort of product is coming that could possibly pace that.
What about the more affordable car that was promised in what was the first half of 2025?
Didn't he kind of say something about that?
He's alluded generally to new vehicles, including more affordable models, but what those models are, we have no idea. It's not going to be a $25,000 Tesla with a steering wheel and pedals, because he was very dismissive of a question posed about that. So, I think it's pretty clear at this point they're going to refresh the Model Y and maybe offer some cheaper versions of the Model Y and the Model 3, and are counting on getting growth going again.
And we know, Carol, that steering wheels and pedals are not the future for Tesla.
So I hear. I'm thinking it's a cheaper Cybertruck. Like maybe you get a discounted version. I don't know.
That's definitely coming too. It's got to. Yeah.
Good stuff. Craig Trudell, thank you so much. Global Autos editor at Bloomberg News, joining us from our bureau in London. Now, one especially vocal Tesla shareholder, Cybertruck owner and frequent guest on our air, is Ross Gerber. He's the co-founder, president, and CEO at Gerber Kawasaki Wealth and Investment Management. Ross, in recent months, has expressed doubts about Tesla's ability to meet its sales goals, dismissing bullish claims about the company's robotics and self-driving technology. Well, he joined us right after Tesla's latest earnings release on Wednesday.
Really, Tesla runs into the problem of cannibalizing its other cars. And that, I think, is what's causing them to pause. Now, what I've been saying is if they would have put a steering wheel on that RoboCab, it would have been a much more exciting launch for me and I think for customers, knowing that this 2-seater, cheaper car could be something we could actually just buy and drive. The robotaxi business is not a business that I'm excited about. It's not really what I think Tesla should be doing. There already are robotaxis that exist called Waymo, and Uber is already the master of transportation. So to me, Tesla should be selling EVs, focusing on making great EVs with great software, and not trying to pivot into being some sort of robotaxi company. But once again, I think people want to buy the cars, and if they're worried about selling the cars, they'll do just fine.
Ross, Elon Musk in politics. He's donated. He's one of the largest donors to the Trump candidacy, to the Trump campaign. He's got his America Political Action Committee, a super PAC. He's become incredibly active. I'm wondering, from the perspective of business, if in a time when we're so divided as a nation, if taking such a clear stance and doing so much to elect one candidate is a risk to the company.
Yes, of course.
Why are you laughing
strategic,
at me?
Well, because I think it's an absurd risk to put your company in that you could avoid, right? So, I personally tried to stay out of this election. I don't get any positive from my clients expressing my liberal opinions, which are liberal. And, I think people who work at my firm know that. But, as a business person, it doesn't really serve my purposes to espouse my liberal beliefs on everybody. And that said, Elon's extremely right-wing beliefs turn off a lot of his core demo. Now, a lot of people don't believe that's happening, but I mean, look at what the effort they have to do to sell a car today. And they still refuse to advertise. So taking this stance for Elon is kind of a lose-lose for Tesla, because if Trump wins, he doesn't give a crap about EVs. He supports oil, and Elon's going to learn about Trump, which is that he's a liar. And so all this money Elon's putting into Trump to hopefully have some power, he's going to learn the hard way about Trump. Just ask Giuliani. So that's a lose. And if Trump loses, it's a disaster for Elon, just personally, and for his personal brand, and for everything that he's been working on. And it really puts Tesla in a tough position, because the administration isn't going to do anything to help them. That's for sure. So I don't get it, other than I guess he thinks America's in this horrible place, but the stock market's hitting all-time highs every day, and I think America's in a wonderful place. But it's all a matter of perception, And I think this is the most political I've ever seen a CEO, and that's one of the reasons we've lowered our position in Tesla, is we do think it affects sales and affects the brand and ultimately margins. And we're excited about margins going up instead of going down for a quarter, which is great news, But this is coming from the fact that the car market is so difficult that the cost of goods has gone down, not because Tesla is making more margin because people are willing to pay more for a Tesla.
I want to talk a little bit more about Elon Musk. Matt Levine calls it the attention auction, that, there's just a lot of things competing for Elon Musk's attention. And this has been discussed before, but I am curious to hear your opinion on whether or not the fact that Elon is so spread thin across these different efforts, how you're thinking about that when you're taking a look at your Tesla position.
Well, this is probably one of the biggest issues, is he doesn't actually work at Tesla. Like you go to work at your company every day, like you're the CEO. I don't think that's what he does. And I don't think that Elon gets more hours in a day than you or I do. So he might sleep 4 hours a day instead of 8. Well, where that's going to cost him is at the end of his life, because it's super unhealthy to live this way. There's this sort of opinion that he has some superhuman ability. He doesn't. So he's spending his time working for Trump right now and doing politics, and he's not spending his time getting his full self-driving to work, which it still doesn't. And so this is really the issue for me as an investor, is shouldn't the CEO of your company be there every day, or at least pretend? And then the second thing is this lack of attention to what needs to be done, especially around full self-driving, is really troubling to me, because I see the competitors all over the place. I'm here in the heart of EVs, right, and robotaxis. They're everywhere. They're working in extremely difficult driving conditions that my Cybertruck can't even come close to tackling.
Russ, we gotta go. We gotta let you get back to work. We do appreciate you joining us. It's always a treat when you are on our air, especially post Tesla earnings. Ross Gerber, President and CEO over at Gerber Kawasaki Wealth and Investment Management.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 2 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
The European Central Bank recently lowered interest rates for the third time this year as a hastier retreat in inflation allowed it to offer support to the region's stuttering economy. We got some economic news just this past week on showing how the European zone is struggling.
In an exclusive interview with Bloomberg, ECB President Christine Lagarde said that the bank is, quote, rather satisfied with how inflation has slowed below the 2% goal, but that the central bank will remain cautious and not jump to conclusions.
At the moment, we are not totally unhappy with what we see, because it looks very much that inflation is on the right track of disinflation. We come from very high numbers, as high on average for the whole of the euro area as 10.6%. And the latest reading we had for the inflation in September was 1.7. We're looking at a lot of data to make sure that this disinflationary process continues to be well on track.
That was ECB President Christine Lagarde speaking exclusively on Bloomberg Television in Washington, D.C.
We get another view on the rate cut in Europe and more specifically the economy of Italy with Alessandra Perazzelli, Deputy Governor of the Bank of Italy, the Italian central bank. Tim and Bloomberg's Emily Graffeo began with her take on the ECB decision to cut rates.
Well, this was expected and follows like a very long period of unprecedented, very restrictive monetary policy that has taken us in 2022 and 2023 to a unprecedented situation since the euro was introduced. So it's kind of too soon to understand how this is going to play both for the banks and for the system as a whole, for the stability of the system as a whole. What I can say is that this was expected, and we will see how it goes forward in the coming months. It's clearly a situation that has been quite interesting for supervisors like myself. We have been seeing banks making unprecedented, profitability in the last years. They were rocket high, something that has, of course, created a number of impacts on the market and has, given us supervisors a little bit of a red flag on everything like credit risk and liquidity risks. And these are the issues that right now are under the limelight of the ECB, the SSM arm, which is the supervisory arm of the ECB, and of course also Bank of Italy that participates to the Eurozone and in the SSM.
So we know that Spain, Portugal, and Greece are among the countries helping to keep the Eurozone out of a recession. How would you describe the economy in Italy right now?
Well, right now, what we've seen is, the economy is being growing, in the last year. Predictions are also bringing the economy steadily, I would say, for the next quarters. The banking system in Italy has been strong and able to support the economy, and this is due to the work that has been done, in the last years together with the SSM. So we are looking at with some positive expectations as to the next quarter. So I would say that between Spain, Portugal, and Italy, we are, pretty much going the same direction.
What about when it comes to immigration in Italy? This is a huge topic here in the U.S. ahead of the presidential election. Our own Bloomberg News team reporting that Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's government is pushing through new legislation to salvage its controversial plan to curb undocumented migration after a court blocked a project to divert asylum seekers to Albania. How do you look at the role of documented migrants and undocumented migrants in the Italian economy?
Well, this is a very difficult issue that's difficult in Italy, given also the fact that we have, borders that can be easily sort of, penetrated. And this has been an issue that has been brought by a number of our governments at European level. I think that we are in the process of understanding and this issue of, catering for external aid in order to take care of undocumented immigrants is has been very much wanted by the government. I know that right now there are some, issues that also concern the judiciary vis-a-vis that decision. We will see how it goes. For sure, this is something that Europe needs to tackle together. I mean, there isn't something that every single country can take care of. It's a European issue as much as it's an American issue.
It's interesting. That's my question, because here in the U.S., I think it's fair to say, and a lot of economists would agree, there are jobs that Americans who are born in America typically will not do in the United States, jobs that traditionally go to migrants and migrant labor. Do those jobs exist in Italy?
More and more, I would say, yes. I think that Italians are not, taking those jobs that were traditionally there for maybe, lower income classes and lower income people. It's slowly becoming the same as it is here, maybe not with the rhythm and with the growth, that you have seen and experienced in the United States.
I want to pivot to financial regulation because Bloomberg News' Laura Noonan had written earlier in October that Germany, France, and Italy had urged the EU to show restraint in financial rulemaking and instead focus on boosting the competitiveness of the banking sector. That was the Treasury. And so we're wondering if the Bank of Italy kind of shares that stance when it comes to balancing competition and regulation.
Well, I think that if we look at the last couple of years and what happened in Switzerland and what happened with the U.S. regional banks, we clearly see that there has to be a balance between regulation and competition, but regulation is, we believe, the most important tool together with supervision in order to keep, financial stability in the euro system. And, I think that we proved that the full implementation of Basel III has given it to supervisors a harmonized set of schemes of, reporting that has been extremely helpful in the years that followed the crisis of 2007, 2008. Today, if you look at the European banking market, you see that the banks are very stable and able to support the economy, and that's exactly the job they should do.
I want to talk a little bit about innovation and fintech in particular, because here in the United States, you have regulators trying to figure out the role that fintech should play when it comes compared to big banks, for example. What do you think the priorities for the next commission should be when it comes to the future of finance, when it comes to fintech companies that I speak of?
Well, in Europe, we would definitely have to complete the capital market union. That is very, very instrumental to, innovation, because it creates all the, the financial tools to finance innovation. What we see happening in Italy right now, that the competition is shifting. It's not among banks anymore, but it's also between banks and those tech companies that come from other sides of other industries.
The same here in the U.S.
It's the same as in the U.S., and there's a lot also coming from the payment system industry. So if we look at the number of licenses that we've been granting in the last few years, out of, say, 87, 2 were for banks and 85 for other type of financial institutions. So the thing is really, how do banks cope with legacy when it comes to the IT, with IT legacy, and how also they are entering more and more into contracts with third parties providers that come from tech industry, and they're becoming extremely relevant also for the kind of concentration, in the European market.
But do you think your colleagues and do you think regulators in Italy are doing the right thing when it comes to embracing this technology?
I think so. We have had a lot of changes, within our own institution in order to cope with this, and created a way to talk to the market and understanding of what kind of regulation is needed. The European Commission has issued a number of vertical and horizontal regulations that are extremely interesting, and we are now implementing those and trying to organize sort of innovation in a way which does not create instability at the market, but at the same time, we don't want to stifle it. We want newcomers, we want innovation, we want to create new industry.
And we're talking about fintech, and an issue that comes up a lot is cybersecurity. And I'm wondering how the ECB plays a role in protecting both consumers and corporations, including banks, from this emerging threat.
Well, there are now a couple of pieces of legislation that have been put together in the EU that look explicitly after a security of infrastructure, and that is, of course, an issue that concerns banks, but concerns also utilities and other important networks of the country. The one thing that it's very important, the kind of risk that we're looking at, is how interconnected the platforms are becoming, and how this role of third-party providers is increasingly important when it comes to create new ability for companies, for banks to provide these services. So I think this is main top issue on the EU legislator agenda and on ours.
We have a story by our team here at Bloomberg News about central bankers losing sleep over Europe's souring economies, have another worry looming large. How much more damage Donald Trump could cause if he returns to the White House? We're 2 weeks away from the election here in the U.S. How are you watching it?
Well, we're concerned like everybody else. And I think that, one of the issues for us regulators is that, deregulation, you will see what happened with the U.S. regional banks. There are huge banks compared to European size. And, the lack of application of Basel III, the sort of like the light touch supervision, I think it's something that worries the international markets. You don't need to be a non-internationally active bank in order to create a wave that touches then other countries and other industries.
So your concern is mostly about regulation when it comes to smaller banks?
I would say so. Yes, definitely. That is an area that has been clearly, something that has created concern in last year when, Silicon Valley Bank and the other regional banks that didn't hit the press too much, but we knew about it. And this is, of course, something that we don't know whether there can be a contagion, and how that's going to work also going towards Europe.
Alessandra Petticelli, Deputy Governor of the Bank of Italy, the Italian Central Bank, joining us here in the Bloomberg Businessweek studio.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Plenty ahead in our second hour of the weekend edition of Bloomberg Businessweek, including the high schooler who kind of schooled us. He created a method to detect pesticide residue on produce using a handheld detector with some AI thrown in, which is kind of like Tim and I, like, wait, what? How old are you? And what did you do? I truly, every time I wash fruit or eat fruit, I think about his device and I want one.
Plus, the CEO of Lifeway Foods on tapping into the dairy resurgence among American consumers. Kefir? Anyone?
Kefir? I know. We're still trying to figure it out, right?
Doesn't matter how you say it. It tastes good.
Ah, nice to know. First up this hour, what started as a battery company in the 1990s in Shenzhen, China, has now become one of the best-selling EV brands in the world. And now the company's startling growth has made it a global player, and that has sparked tariffs from the United States and the EU.
We're talking about Chinese automaker BYD. It stands for Build Your Dreams. They've seemed to figure out something that the rest of the auto industry has not, and that is build an affordable EV for the masses.
Yeah, I feel like that's the holy grail in the EV world. Yeah. All right, this story is the cover of the upcoming new issue of Bloomberg Businessweek and is by Bloomberg News auto reporter Gabby Coppola, who joined us to talk about China's EV offensive.
BYD was founded in 1995 by a Chinese battery scientist named Wan Chuanfu. And he was basically a government researcher who saw that, the Chinese economy was opening up, and he decided to move to Shenzhen in the south of China, which is today kind of one of the, like a Silicon Valley of China. And he started out making batteries for mobile phones, but his dream was to electrify the auto industry. He always thought that you could make, battery powered vehicles. And it took a really long time, from 1995 up until about 2020 for him to make that a reality. But the story is really about how he did that. And, BYD, because they are kind of the poster child for China's EV offensive around the world, I mean, they're not the only one by any means. There's lots of Chinese EV companies that are now trying to export around the world. We see a lot in Europe, but also in Southeast Asia. But BYD is kind of the strongest and the biggest, and, they're the biggest EV seller in China. And I think because we're in this moment of trade war and talking about tariffs and tension with China, there's a tendency by people in the West to kind of think that, this is all because of Chinese subsidies. And I'm not at all saying that there aren't Chinese subsidies involved. I mean, the Chinese economy is not a free market economy. There's a lot of protectionism, and the scale of subsidies that they use is much higher than what other, free market democratic countries do. But if it were just subsidies, there would be 20 BYDs, and there's really just one. And that is due to the innovation and the sort of long-term vision of Wan Chuanfu and the other key people in the company.
Well, Gabby, get to it, because it does feel like the nut that they figured out how to crack, the holy grail, if you will, is to build an affordable EV for the masses, which we keep getting promises from the likes of Elon Musk and others, and yet it hasn't happened. BYD, though, figured it out. How is that? Is it just getting the cost of batteries down? What was it?
It's not just one thing. I think it's a confluence of things. But, one thing I learned in researching this story, Carol, is that, we look at the US now and we say, oh, EVs aren't taking off. Look at this, sales are down. China went through that too for like 10 years. China also was engineering incentives. But the thing is, BYD never stopped. I mean, they had a vision to do this and they kept doing it when it was not popular, when they weren't selling. One thing that's really key is they also sell hybrids. So they're not like Tesla, where if EV demand drops, that's all they got. If you got range anxiety, BYD's got a plug-in hybrid for you. But I think the key to what they've achieved is a lot of it has to do with vertical integration. UBS did a report that their vehicles are 25% cheaper to make than basically the rest of the auto industry, and a lot of that is because they make so many things themselves in-house. This is not just a battery. This is not just a car company. They make semiconductor chips. They make solar panels. They make components for consumer electronics for companies like Apple. I mean, they're manufacturing titan, really, in China. But the other part of it is they had a battery breakthrough. Like I said, Wan Chuanfu is a battery scientist. And I think China gives a lot of subsidies for research and investment, R&D and investment. That's a big part of their economy. And so, I mean, I did visit their headquarters in Shenzhen, and I felt like I was at an academic campus or like a national lab, because there was just the museum of all the things they've invented and researched there's a lot there.
What's there? Give us an idea of what's there apart from vehicles that we've seen pictures of, because we know we're not driving these things here in the U.S. We'll get to that in just a minute.
Right. Well, and keep in mind, they're not letting an American journalist in to see behind, the wall and see all their secrets. But I mean, one thing that Wan Chuanfu is very proud of is they always do this nail test where you go in the museum lobby area and there's this glass wall and there's a lithium-ion battery with nickel. And then there's the BYD battery, which uses LFP or lithium iron phosphate. That's kind of a key part of their success, is they decided early on to work with this battery chemistry, LFP, which is more stable and less fire prone than the nickel-based batteries we've seen the Koreans and everybody in the West using. So when you go into this museum, they have this robot arm that comes down and sticks a nail right through the battery. And on the nickel side, you see the thing explode. And on the BYD LFP battery, nothing happens. So that's probably one of Wan Chuanfu's greatest achievements, is he was saying, look, I made this battery that, can actually be used for long range vehicles, but it could, and look, they brand it as the safe thing. No battery is 100%, zero fire risk. And I think if you were to Google, you'd find that's true for BYD too. But, that is a key part. But, suspension systems, research on materials, polymers, so many things. I mean, engineering, all these things. But another thing I should mention in my story, a scoop that we uncovered, myself and our star Apple reporter Mark Gurman, is that actually BYD and Apple worked together for a battery system for the Apple car when that project was still going. And our reporting showed that work that Apple and BYD did together did influence and impact somewhat of BYD's own blade development, because at one point both companies had access to this very similar technology. Apple decided to shelve it because who wants to get into the car business these days, I guess, and BYD ran with it, And to be clear, BYD developed the blade battery by themselves. There's no Apple IP in that blade battery, but the two companies worked together. You had some of the best and brightest minds in this field working together, and BYD is the one that commercialized it, and now they're the biggest car maker in China, thanks in part to that battery breakthrough.
Hey, so Carol, you getting one?
Well, listen, my husband and I have been looking at EVs for a while, and they're just crazy expensive, and it's just hard to get. And I kind of want to do the right thing for the environment.
Well, you're not going to get a BYD.
I'm not going to get a BYD. Listen, we only have about 45 seconds left here, Gabby, and I highly recommend everybody check out the magazine, because there's so much detail in this, and it's a company that we talk about so much. 30, 40 seconds, though, takeaway before we have to say goodbye.
If the West, if U.S. and European companies want to compete with China, they have to be honest about what they're up against. And it's not just subsidies. It's a very competitive company. We're down a few points, quite a few points in the fourth quarter, but the game's not over. There's still a chance. But, companies need to get honest with themselves about the kind of cultural change and technological change that needs to happen for them to compete with BYD.
I wonder how many automakers are somehow, surreptitiously getting a BYD car and pulling it apart and understanding everything that's in it and trying to figure out what they need to do. Right? Gabby?
Business and do it in teardowns. Yes, that's happening.
Great reporting. The Apple scoop, too, as well. Unbelievable. Bloomberg News auto reporter Gabby Coppola. She's, of course, got the cover story of Bloomberg Businessweek.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 2 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Sticking with the automotive space, General Motors had its best day in 4 years this past week after it signaled solid U.S. demand for its highest margin vehicles, even as the broader auto market softens.
While some rival automakers are cutting prices and boosting incentives to reduce inventory, GM has been able to hold the line on high-demand vehicles, like its old-school gas-powered GMC Yukon SUV and the Chevy Silverado pickup. For more on GM's success, Emily Graffeo and I spoke to Bloomberg News auto reporter Keith Naughton.
Well, they're making a lot of money in the home market with their traditional vehicles, with, gas-fueled pickup trucks and sport utility vehicles. And that's helping to offset losses that they have in electric vehicles and losses that they have in China and losses that they have with their autonomous unit Cruise. So they're selling a lot of traditional vehicles at high prices and high margins.
Who's buying these vehicles? These cars, I mean, they're not as expensive as the EVs, but these are expensive cars now.
Well, for sure. I mean, cars average almost $50,000 these days in price, and interest rates still remain sort of stubbornly high, though the Fed has begun to lower rates that will hopefully pull down car loan rates. But the American consumer, at least in GM's experience, is remaining incredibly resilient and continues to buy really well outfitted cars, which is, driving profits up for them. And, they, as you said, they raised their guidance. It's the third time this year that they've raised guidance. They've beat earnings estimates for 7 quarters in a row. So consumers have not stopped buying cars.
So is this more a story about the resiliency of the U.S. consumer in general, or is this a GM-specific kind of, optimism?
Well, GM is definitely outgunning its Detroit rivals, Ford and Stellantis. Neither of them have beat estimates 7 quarters in a row and are not raising guidance. So, GM is doing especially well. But what new car buyers are buying these days are more well-outfitted cars and larger cars that have higher sticker prices. And that has driven up margins. Everybody is expecting pricing to soften because inventories are finally replenished after, the shortages of the pandemic era. But still, consumers are paying up for new wheels.
Hey, we got 30 seconds left, Keith. I'm going to go there. EVs. How ugly is it for GM?
Well, it's interesting with GM, Tim, because they are coming out with lower priced EVs like the Equinox. And those are really resonating because, they're not too expensive. So GM is having some success with its EVs, and Mary Barra, the CEO, said they're going to reduce those losses on EVs substantially next year.
Keith Naughton, Bloomberg News auto reporter, joining us from Detroit, Michigan. Keith, thanks for joining us. Always good to see you. General Motors shares higher by 10.3% as we speak.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Well, you can find our next guest products in the dairy section of your local supermarket. Lifeway, known for its kefir. You know it. It's like that yogurt-like drink, kind of drinkable yogurt, milk smoothie.
Oh, okay. It's kind of, drinkable. Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Maybe because you don't have
critters.
Young critters running around, right?
And I have older critters.
You have older critters.
An older critter.
Yeah. It's a publicly traded company, about $400 million market cap. Julie Smolansky is the second generation of her family to run the company after her father started it and took it public a couple years later on the NASDAQ. Julie is chairman, president, and CEO of Lifeway. She joins us from Los Angeles. Julie, how are you? Welcome.
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. You've got a really cool story, and the company is a really interesting one because it's not often that you find publicly traded firms that have such a narrow focus in terms of products. Give us an idea of how business is right now and where areas of growth are for you?
Sure. Well, it's an exciting time to be at Lifeway. Our category is the probiotic dairy functional food space. And we are seeing just a booming explosion of business. Just the last 19 quarters have been year over year consecutive growth years for us. And that trend is not slowing down anytime soon.
Is that because of what's happening in terms of the way people think about products such as yours? Or are you doing things internally when it comes to product development, when it comes to placement, distribution, and the like? What are you attributing that to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both. I think, first of all, to just step back a little bit, I think people really want to know where their products are coming from, where the brands originate from. And I think Lifeway is really the embodiment of the American dream. It's just a remarkable story. As you mentioned, my dad we all came from the former Soviet Union, and we were the first of 48 families that were settled in Chicago. And, this idea of living the American dream was something my father aspired to. And when he walked the grocery stores in America, he noticed that there was no kefir, which was a staple product for 2,000 years. Something that my ancestors, my grandmothers passed down generation to generation, and it was simply non-existent in the United States. And I think that, and so that's how Lifeway was started. And then he took it public 2 years later. But I think consumers really love that heritage story. They want to know that their brand came from someplace authentic and real, not just out of an AI private equity office or something like that. And so I think that 38 years of legacy that Lifeway has been bringing to American consumers and consumers globally is part of the reason. Additionally, with this really wonderful storied product past of my ancestors knowing intuitively that kefir improved their well-being, their health. They attributed their centurion, living to 100 years of age based on their consumption of kefir. And it wasn't until 1908 when Dr. Elie Metchnikoff, did the first round of science and research on kefir and probiotics and fermented dairies like kefir. And he found that it did indeed help improve the body's health. And today, modern science is only just catching up on the microbiome, friendly bacteria, probiotics, and kefir specifically. And so there's so much exciting medical research. And Lifeway is a brand that meets the moment. We are on every grocery store shelf across the United States, from Whole Foods and ultra premium markets to Walmart and Costco. Yeah,
that's what I wanted to talk about, because I was talking to somebody recently who has a startup-ish food company. They've raised quite a bit of money and they're pretty prominent, but she was telling me how difficult it is to get shelf space at some of these prominent retailers. How do you do it as, you're not independent in the sense of a startup, you're far from it, you're a publicly traded company, but you're not Dannon by any means, you're not Lactalis. So how do you do it? How do you compete with the big players?
Well, I think they compete with us. I think they aspire to be relevant, like Lifeway is. We have been very passionate and trend-setting from day one, and we still operate very nimble, and we are trend-setting. We aren't just following trends, but we're creating the trends. We have been, dedicated to putting a bottle of Lifeway kefir in everybody's hand, every consumer's hand, from cradle to grave, generation to generation, and building trial, showing up at culturally relevant events, yoga. We were one of the first brands to partner with yoga studios across the country. You can try our samples, our products at Lollapalooza, at Austin City Limits, all different, really amazing cultural moments that are relevant for consumers. And the way that we show up to our consumers, educating them on the importance of gut health, is one of the reasons why we have had such tremendous success.
So really interesting story, family story, publicly held company, small market cap, about $390 million. Stocks almost doubled year to date. Julia, I am curious though, talk us through some of the metrics, the type of growth that you're seeing, revenue, top line growth, earnings growth, cash coming in. What do you do to kind of keep growing the company?
Yeah, I mean, we have had the most incredible historic quarters. The last 5 quarters were record-breaking quarters. Like I mentioned, 19th consecutive quarters of year-over-year top-line growth. We just hit the second quarter this year. We almost hit $50 million, which has been a number we've had long circled in our aspirations. Up more than 25% this year. Our 2019 revenue went from about 93 million to almost 200 million right now, 200 million run rate. So we've doubled our revenue. While I don't obsess about the share price at all, I am very proud of the fact that in the last 5 years, our share price is up almost over 1,200%. So, these are some remarkable numbers. Our gross profit improved to a 92% increase. Our gross margin was up 290 basis points. Yeah. So this is the metrics that prove that, consumers are looking for Lifeway kefir. We are taking market share away from other brands of other types of functional beverages or other kind of old stale products like yogurt. I think we're the more trendier, fashionable, healthier cousin of yogurt.
Hey, one thing we wanted to ask you is, nifty function on the Bloomberg where you can look at, your top shareholders. And Danone North America has about a 23%. Yeah, reported that back in September. And you guys confirmed a receipt of a proposal from Danone. They offered $25 a share. You guys right now trade at $26.40 a share. Is there an offer? Is that the future that you ultimately will maybe connect with this company? Danone will own you, or is the plan to kind of keep going alone?
Well, while I can't comment on that, I would like to point to the incredible success that we're having at Lifeway. We're on a really strong growth trajectory with a really long runway. And in terms of growing both our flagship product of kefir, but also an incredible, exciting, emerging category, which is not new for us, but new for the American people, which is farmer's cheese. And farmer's cheese is so exciting because maybe you've noticed that last year, cottage cheese went viral on TikTok. And it's all over. Everyone's making blended cottage cheese and various recipes like that on social media. And our farmer's cheese is one of our legacy products that we've been making for over 38 years. It's something my grandmother's made. Like I mentioned, twaróg in my language, it's called twaróg. And farmer's cheese is exploding, and we're really excited to be growing that category. We're the largest manufacturer of farmer's cheese today, and it's going to be really exciting to scale that into all of our locations where our kefir is currently sold, and bring this new category in the dairy space. Bioavailable, high quality protein is something that consumers are really looking for and they're craving, and that's something that Lifeway's really has been pioneering and paving for a long time in the natural food space, organic food space, which is now mass market. So that's a really exciting time for us.
We only have about a minute left, but what's your product pipeline look like, expansion beyond farmer's cheese and kefir?
Yeah, well, we are scaling our ProBugs, which is a pouched product for kids, pouched kefir product for kids that we innovated over 10 years ago. And we've really invested in some equipment and machinery to really scale that. We disrupted the entire baby food packaging space by launching the first ever pouch in the United States for kids. So we're excited to scale that into mass market. Right now, it's at Whole Foods nationwide. We also just announced the expansion of 10 exciting new trendy flavors, lactose-free. That's another big concern in the dairy space. People are looking for lactose-free products, which Lifeway offers. But they're really exciting flavors like taro, ube, matcha latte, lychee, really on trend, snackable, easy Instagrammable types of new products that we're excited to scale that nationwide as well. And then we have just like a long trajectory of new products in the pipeline, which I can't discuss just yet, but look for more things connected to skin gut access. We know that probiotics work really well on the skin or inside out. So some kind of skin skin-friendly products, brain gut access.
Okay, we'll come back and tell us more when you can give us some of the specifics, because that's super interesting. Julie Smolansky, CEO at Lifeway Foods, joining us from LA.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
It is Bloomberg Business Week, and I want to know, Carol Massar.
Yes?
What you were doing when you were in 9th grade.
First year of high school?
Yeah.
I don't know, just trying to...
Gymnastics?
Gymnastics?
Yeah.
Cheerleading.
Okay.
Trying to get A's. Getting A's.
Were you anywhere close to creating an AI-based handheld pesticide detector?
That would be a no.
Okay. That's what Sirius Subhash has been up to. He's in 9th grade, and that creation helped crown him the winner of the 2024 3M Young Scientist Challenge. Also includes a nice $25,000 cash prize,
Not
a trip
too
here to
shabby.
New York, to ring the bell to New York Stock Exchange, and gets to hang out with us, which I think is just the biggest prize that's around.
Sirius Subhash is the winner of the 2024 3M Young Scientist Challenge, and Aditya Banerjee is Senior Research Energy of the Corporate Research Process Lab over at 3M. They both join us in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. Very cool to have you both here. Congratulations, Sirius. First, I want to ask you, Aditya, tell us about this challenge, how long you've been doing it, how it came about, and why you're doing it.
So the 3M Young Scientist Challenge has been around for 17 years. This is my first year doing this mentorship. So I'm just awfully lucky to be paired with Sirius, and it has been an awesome experience. Our goal as part of the 3M Young Scientist Challenge is to nurture and just work with such bright young minds, and just help them bring their imagination, their creations to life. So I mean, we live by science applied to life. So they have all the science innovations in their mind. We have some experience in getting the science to people's hands.
Right.
So we hope that we can bridge the gap for them to take his concepts to hands of consumers and help them in any way possible to make that journey smooth.
Well, Sirius, tell us about what you have sitting in front of you, because it looks like an iPhone attached to some sort of gizmo here. What's going on?
So my device, my project, it's called Pestiscan. And so what it is at home, people can scan for pesticide residues on their produce items. That's the real core concept here. Because there's a lot of contaminants like pesticide residues that can stick around on produce after washing, where they've been linked to health issues like certain cancers and Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, neurodegenerative diseases along those lines.
You can pick that up, and you can. There's a camera right there in front of you. For those watching on YouTube, Elizabeth's going to get a shot of this thing. It's pretty cool. So there's an app that goes with it. There's also some hardware there. It uses a type of technology. I practice so many times saying this type of technology.
Say it.
Can you say it for me, please?
Yeah, it's spectrophotometry.
Spectrophotometry?
Yeah.
And what does that do?
So the idea is different materials reflect and absorb different wavelengths of light. So Pestiscan can look for those wavelengths that are reflected and absorbed by pesticide residues.
So we are very lucky that we have a lot of food here at Bloomberg and a lot of fresh fruit, and we all tap into it. I've just had a banana and often tap an apple or some other things. We had some grapefruit this morning. You picked up an apple in our food court up in the Link on the 6th floor. And so show us how it works and what you do, and then what you found out.
Yeah, so for using the actual device, you just connect the app to the device. You just turn both on. You point the device at the produce item, and then you tap scan. And in a couple seconds, the results are back. And this apple had no pesticide residues on it at all.
Score.
Which
that
is
makes
amazing,
me so
because
happy.
I don't know if these are organic apples.
I don't know that they are either.
But that's good to know. There is a sign upstairs that says, please wash fruit before eating it. But
which
that
we
might
always
be because
do.
Sometimes, people go and check the peaches to make sure they're soft.
I check out a few things. It's really fascinating. So how did you kind of come up with the idea? How'd you pull it together? And how did you use your mentor to help you?
So the whole concept really started when I was having a conversation with my mom. So she was insisting that I wash my produce before consuming it.
Right.
And
Good mom.
Okay.
Good mom.
You gotta wash your produce.
So go ahead.
And my question was, why and how effective is it? So looking into that, I saw that there were a bunch of contaminants like pesticide residues that can be on produce, but washing isn't necessarily completely effective. The residues do stay on afterward. So the idea is, if we could detect them, we could make sure that we weren't consuming them. And that's really where the idea for Pestiscan came from. So after I started building the device and I joined the 3M Young Scientist Challenge, my mentor Aditya has been really helpful with this, especially when I've gotten stuck. One big time was when I was designing my machine learning models, and these are what take the actual data from the sensor and then turn that into results, what you'd see on the screen, whether the device has pesticide residues, whether the produce has pesticide residues or not. And he's helped me when I get stuck. He's helped me get unstuck.
I want to ask you, so what's the, balance of here's how you do it and solving the problem and helping him to say, you've got this problem, let me steer you so that you figure it out yourself?
You got that exactly right. Like I said, our goal is to help nurture them. So I would pose it as have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And he, being a very meticulous and very energetic person, he would do his homework and he would make sure he follows up on that. And next week when we chat, he would inevitably come up with a solution.
So Sirius is in Georgia, Snellville, Georgia. You're in Minneapolis.
Yep.
Were you guys meeting on Zoom once a week? How did this work?
Yep. Yeah, we would meet after his school's done once a week and have a conversation about what he has been up to last week, anything he wanted to discuss with me, any next steps and stuff like that.
Can you talk a little bit, Suresh, about how you got introduced to this program? Because it's my understanding that you've known about the Young Scientist Challenge from 3M since you were in second grade?
Yes, I learned about the 3M Young Scientist Challenge when Gitanjali Rao got nominated as Times Kid of the Year. And when I learned about it and what the challenge really stood for, what it was doing, I thought that this would be a great place for me to submit my inventions. That was really because I've always wanted to leave an impact on the world.
Nice.
In a good way, to leave society a better place. And I thought the 3M Young Scientist Challenge would be a great place for me to start with that. So I skipped 5th grade, so I wasn't able to put it in then. 6th grade, our family was in India and we weren't able to get things figured out. 7th grade, I did apply, but it didn't quite work out. And in this year, I was able to get it in and everything worked out. Yeah.
Did I hear you say inventions, plural?
Yeah, so I've worked on a couple of things before.
Okay.
Pestiscan may be the one single project that I've put my most time into. So I've built a couple things before. I made one robot to deliver books. That was probably the runner-up to this and how much time I put into it. I spent 4 or 5 months on that. I've spent about a year on this latest version.
So what's the commercialization of this? Because I think I could see, I would love to have one in my home, and I'm sure you would.
Or even just an app that could do this using technology that exists inside a phone already, right? So you're at the grocery store, you're like, oh, this is good to go.
Exactly, right? Like we do barcodes of things to find out pricing or whatever, or information. So how do you guys think about, does 3M, who's known for all their different products, and it's not just Post-its, it's a lot of different things. So I'm just curious, do you see something like this and say, okay, there's commercial applications?
Oh, for sure. I mean, part of our conversations was how do you simplify the prototype. That was one of the driving questions that he seek to answer during the summer. He started off with making the module simpler, something that you can just clip onto your phone,
right?
So that it can be used for a consumer. He did a lot of work in driving down the unit cost of each of the modules, and he already has plans to drive it down even lower. So he is already on it.
Well, what do you guys do next? I mean, these guys know I'm like super obsessed with Shark Tank and when people pitch their ideas. But what do you do to help him? Maybe is it on his own, or do you guys work with him to kind of get it to the next step?
So he would be driving a lot on his own, but we are always there to support him whenever there's anything that we can help out. Me personally, 3M as a company, we would definitely be more than happy to help him out. And also, the 3M Young Scientist Challenge alumni, they have a grant program that has been set up. So there are a lot of alumni who leverage that to fund their programs in the future as well. So that is something that's all set up that can be used.
So what do you want to do?
Like, are venture capitalists knocking on your door?
You got a few more years. I imagine you want to continue your education. What's the plan here?
So the big next steps are I'm trying to shrink this quite a bit to where it would be far more portable and easier for a consumer to carry around. And then from there, also just drop in the cost to where it could easily go into people's homes. Those are my key plans for this device in particular.
How much, what's the cost associated with this prototype? Like, how much would this device cost as is now?
So as of now, for this setup, if I were to make 100 of them, that would be $75.
That's not bad.
But I have a plan laid out to where there's a solution. I can put this onto a printed circuit board, which would make this all one singular piece. And that would bring the price down to roughly $35. But I'm looking forward to, in the future, reach a price tag of maybe $20.
Like, very cool. Right? Like, I don't, I just think about, do you have it in the supermarket where people can, I don't know, or does everybody have their own and check it out? Really, really cool. Aditya, one thing I want to ask you, we often talk with folks about the importance of STEM education, and companies, whether they're out in Silicon Valley or thinking about the next generation of workers that they need. Is this part of why 3M is looking to do this?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, we seek to educate or reach out to folks about science and how it's integral part of our life. We have a great science advocacy team within 3M as well. And that's also one of the reasons why during this program we get to meet young, brilliant minds like him, and we try our best to, like I say, nurture and mold them and inspire them to do something. Like he said, like science is part of it, merging with the society. That's another huge thing that we see. So what he's doing,
pretty
making
cool stuff.
Society bigger, society better, that's what we hope for.
The bigger impact. Sirish, congratulations. Sirish Sabash, Aditya Banerjee of 3M. Guys, thank you so much. This is Bloomberg.
This is the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business App. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.